Hello, all, and welcome to our event this evening celebrating the most powerful women in New York, our Power of Diversity Women's 100. Before we get started, I would like to thank our wonderful sponsors for this event, Airbnb, Berkeley College, Spectrum, Kasirer, and the League of Voluntary Hospitals and Homes of New York. We've got a great lineup of speakers tonight that I hope that everyone will enjoy as much as I know I will. And before we get into those remarks from some of the people on our list and some of the lawmakers in our state, we're going to hear some sponsored remarks from Camille Joseph-Goldman, who is the Group Vice President of Government Affairs at Spectrum. So Camille, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, and good evening, everyone. It's truly an honor to be here this evening, and I always emphasize the import of bringing women together to highlight not only the importance of female leadership, but also the accomplishments made, not just in New York City, but throughout the state. I couldn't be more honored to be here today. This year's list includes a list of women, a group of leaders that worked very hard in their discipline, whether it was media, whether it was government, to really think through how they could pave the way and create a space, not only for themselves, but for other leaders. I see familiar names. I know that Suri Kasirer will be on shortly, and I do have the great honor of introducing a mentor and a friend shortly. But let me just say one thing to the women on this list, to those who have aspired to key roles, to those who are still working on their path and thinking through what next steps must entail. We all know and understand that the road must be difficult. Many of you, unfortunately, I think I read in an article recently that we should be able to say there are no more ceilings to break in 2021. Every time I hear the first woman to do something in this year, it is both encouraging, but it is also disappointing because we know that we have the potential, we know that we have the capacity. What we really need is the opportunity. So like many women on this list, I wear many hats. I coach with my daughter. I'm a mother, I'm an executive, and we manage to do all these roles and we manage to do it well. But that comes with great sacrifice. And so tonight, I'm happy that those sacrifices as well as those accomplishments are acknowledged and that we're coming together to kind of laud where we are, but also to accept that there's so much room to grow and there's so much left to do, but together we can essentially accomplish anything. And now I have the great honor to introduce a leader, a trailblazer in the state of New York that I've had the honor to call both a mentor and a friend, my Congresswoman, Yvette Clarke. She represents Brooklyn's 9th Congressional District, but quite frankly, if you're in New York State, and quite frankly, if your interests are aligned with the many detailed and impactful policy initiatives that she fights for, she's your fighter too, no matter where you are located. Like me, she's the daughter of Jamaican immigrants and takes her cultural heritage, her passion for the community, everywhere from Brooklyn, New York to Washington, D.C. Many young women in this state have the honor to call her a mentor and a friend because she sees the importance of not us just helping her leadership, but also pouring into so many women the confidence that's needed to achieve our goals. She has a lot of titles, and she's been lauded in so many spaces as a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, to the chair of the Immigration Task Force. Her passion for issues that is so impactful for so many communities across this nation is not only known, but is well respected. And with that, I'm truly honored to be here and to introduce my friend, my mentor, our leader, Congresswoman Yvette Clarke.
Wow, let me thank you for that wonderful introduction, Camille. Let me also thank City and State for convening us this evening. I have to take you on the road, Camille. That introduction, I think, will get me into a lot of highbrow places, but I'm grateful. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the gracious invitation to share a few thoughts with you at this important event on the topic of the power of diversity. I'm Congresswoman Yvette Clarke, and I proudly represent New York's 9th Congressional District. And it is truly delightful to be here with you in honor of the celebration of the Women Power 100. As a Black woman of Afro-Jamaican descent and a senior member of Congress, I know firsthand the value, importance, and power of diversity and inclusion, also known as D&I, especially in spaces that retain the legacy of discrimination and the historic roots of exclusion and implicit bias. I believe that in our form of governance, a vibrant democracy, diversity and inclusion is not just important, it is an imperative. It is truly our superpower. It is a necessary component for any institution committed to creating a more equitable and just society. It lifts, excuse me, it lifts us leaps and bounds above other nations in terms of global competitiveness, and it provides us with a competitive advantage that few, if any other nations can rival. We can speak to the world from a place of authenticity. Maximizing on our diversity is our greatest tool, an approach to creating possibilities for prosperity and security that have yet to fully be uncovered or fully realized. It is about taking into account all perspectives from our diverse landscape and working together to create a country we all feel good in and that governs its society in a way in which we are maximizing on our ability to extend our leadership at home and abroad without hypocrisy or hesitation. We are driven as Americans and those aspiring to become Americans by common goals, dreams, and aspirations that uniquely position us to conquer the multitude of threats and vulnerabilities to our ever-evolving way of life, our American democracy, and the freedoms therein. Over the years, we have come to see diversity as numbers and quota games, at least some have, including the perspective that diversity and inclusion is the art of taking from one group to provide for another, when nothing could be further from the truth. It's not. Diversity and inclusion is the key to a more equitable nation, and the power of diversity and inclusion is humanity in action. D&I is about harnessing all the power we have available to us, making positive and constructive use of it in every nook and cranny of our institutions. And it must be targeted to usher in meaningful change. When data shows the threshold for racial diversity in boardrooms roles in the United States increased by only 2% in a 10-year period, it's evident we have to do more than talk about the power of diversity and inclusion and demand more inclusion in our boardrooms. We have to take action. We have to ensure that D&I efforts start in the womb with improvements in maternal health among Black women who are 3 times more likely to die from a pregnancy-related cause than white women. D&I efforts must deliberately address the multiple factors that contribute to these disparities, such as variation in quality of healthcare, underlying chronic conditions, structural racism, implicit bias, and diversity within the workforce at every level. Social determinants of health have historically prevented many people from racial and ethnic minority groups from having fair and equitable opportunities for economic, physical, and emotional health. And historical foundations rooted in social and economic oppression have implications for how racism and gender discrimination has been integrated into the structures of society, including public policy, institutional practices, and cultural representations that reinforce racial and gender inequality in all sectors of our organizations. The power of D&I must also address all the variables that stifle our growth and expansion, such as provisions for childcare, housing, food security, transportation, environmental concerns, and other social determinants of our overall health and well-being. And D&I efforts must address the disparities in how we manage the ongoing pandemic of COVID-19, which has disproportionately affected disadvantaged communities at such an alarming rate. It has truly laid bare the socioeconomic inequity that has been resident with us, with all of us, since the founding of our nation. The power of D&I is an opportunity to have people of color and women at the table where the decisions are made and where the culture is set. And as we journey further into the technological age and navigate our society through environmentally friendlier grounds, it is paramount that we stay vigilant and stay inclusive. And that's why I introduced HR 1221, the Electric Vehicles for Underserved Communities Act of 2021, alongside my dear friend and colleague from Nevada, Senator Catherine Cortez Masto. This bill calls for an increase in electric vehicle charging infrastructure in vulnerable communities. It calls for the Department of Energy to create a program and provide grants to increase deployment and access to electric vehicle charging infrastructure, as well as provide technical support for grantees. The DOE will also be in charge of promoting clean and multimodal transportation, improving air quality and emission reduction in vulnerable communities. This is but one example of the power of diversity. And that's because, as your Congresswoman, I was at the table. And we must be deliberate about its trajectory. Diversity and inclusion must be baked into the technological age. We must humanize these efforts and water the seeds that will bear bountiful fruits and extend deep roots that we will all benefit from. The power of diversity and inclusion is about community development. It means establishing programs to support job creation, community revitalization, and development for communities that have been adversely impacted by COVID-19. It means helping lower income communities and other vulnerable groups establish strong human resource infrastructure to apply for grants to bring their community development programs to fruition. It means prioritizing job training and employment and rehabilitation and various construction opportunities in infrastructure and deliberate efforts to empower our youth of underserved communities. The power of diversity is a real superpower, and it's time we collectively harness this power of goodwill to bring about the change we all want to see and to feel and to be a part of. None of us here have to be superheroes to use the power of diversity and inclusion to usher in change. We just have to be willing. So let me thank you once again for inviting me to participate. We are in the midst of a transformational period of time in our nation. We have passed already in the House of Representatives, soon to be signed into law, a bipartisan infrastructure bill that will bring trillions of dollars to communities across this nation to help us rebuild our infrastructure. And women, people of color must be centered in this work so that we can turn the page on old practices that have left diversity and inclusion by the wayside. And certain to come right behind that will be the closing of the Build Back Better agenda, which brings human resource square and upfront so that we can fund the programs that will enable us to stand up a strong, strong, strong nation, addressing climate change, addressing the wealth gap, addressing the needs of the American people. So again, I'm just happy to be with you this evening and wish everyone to stay strong, stay healthy, stay safe, and stay blessed. And may the power of diversity and inclusion remain with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman. That was a great remarks you just gave. Thank you so much for joining us. And apologies, I think that your video might have gotten cut off a little bit too soon, but we were able to hear the very ends of your remarks. Before we move on to the next portion of the evening, I realized that in my introduction, I failed to make note of the circumstances of this year's Power 100 list. We have our first ever female governor in the state of New York. We have we still have our first female majority leader in the state Senate for the first time ever. It's closer to 3 women in a room as opposed to 3 men in a room. We have Letitia James as our Attorney General, and now also running for governor. 2 great women running for a seat. You know, there are going to be a lot of choices, but women are certainly in the mix. And, you know, this is a momentous year and a great year, a great time for us to be celebrating all of the women on our list here today. Next up, now that I have made up for the mistake of my introduction of not noting just how historic this year has been, we're going to hear some sponsored remarks from Suri Kasirer, who is herself a very powerful woman, consistently ranked as one of the most influential lobbyists in New York City. So Suri, take it away.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And really thank you to City and State for inviting me here to speak and for including me in this list. I am the president of Kasirer, which is an advocacy firm here working in New York City and New York State. We work with not-for-profit clients, corporate clients, real estate, healthcare, tech, education. We are so proud to be representing so many important groups and people in New York. I am so honored to be recognized along this list of really accomplished and powerful women. I'm so proud that there are so many people on this list that are clients of ours, that are partners in government, that are longtime friends, and so many women that I admire and respect. There are so many people in corporate, political leadership, not-for-profit advocates, and frontline workers. And I just want to share a little bit of my own story. I came from a very traditional, religious, Orthodox background. When I was a young girl, I don't think I ever thought I would be on a women's power list. I don't think I ever thought I would have my own business. I don't think I would ever thought I'd be recognized as a leader in my community. I never thought that a woman could actually achieve personal and professional success and be a mom of 3 children and do everything and work hard at everything. And so for me, this is a dream, doing what I love and being part of New York and being part of such an important group of women. And Rebecca, you started to talk about firsts. And when I looked at the list, the power list this year, that's really what I thought about. You mentioned the first woman governor in New York. You mentioned a woman attorney general. This past week, we elected for the first time a majority of women in the city council. We now have 31 out of 51 women in the city council. Vanessa Gibson is going to be the first Bronx Borough president who's female. Rodneyse Bichotte, Hermelyn, is the first Brooklyn County leader. That's a woman. Helene Weinstein is the first female chair of Ways and Means. Taryn Duffy is the first woman who's head of the New York Gaming Association, and on and on and on. And it's really incredible to think about each of these women, how hard they work and what they achieve. And I just want to acknowledge, we talk about diversity on the list, and I just want to acknowledge that some of the hardest working and most powerful women in our city are the single parents, are the women who help us take care of our children, are the women who help us keep our homes clean and respectable, are the people who take care of our parents and the sick people in our community and the children who have special needs. And sadly, a lot of those people don't qualify to be on this list. But I just want to say that all of us in our own lives and in our community wouldn't be here if not for those people. And so having more women in office is so important, because I think we all recognize all of the people that help us get to where we got and help us stay where we are. And that's why it's more important than ever that we continue to elect women who are doing an amazing job raising kids, raising families, taking care of their parents, and really caring for their communities. And really highlighting, as the Congresswoman just did, women's health issues, both in the minority community, but as women. There are so many issues that we face that are unique to who we are. And I think I'm so proud that there are so many women in office. And if you look at what's happening in Congress over the last 10 years, how many women we've elected just here in New York alone. And it's so wonderful that we have two of them with us here today. So thank you again to City and State for making me part of it. I am so proud to be a sponsor of the City and State and all of the important work that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Suri, for your remarks. Certainly agree. I am very focused on the state politics. I did not mean to leave out any of the amazing firsts we've had in New York City, especially notably with 31 out of 51, as you said, women for the first time ever. You know, the goal was 21 and 21. It turned out to be 31 and 31, which is truly amazing. Next up, we're going to hear from another female member of our New York delegation of Congress, Congressmember Representative Carolyn Maloney, who I hope is recovering well from SOMOS. I saw you there. How are you doing, Representative?
Okay, great. Am I on?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that introduction, and hello to everyone, and good evening. Thank you to City and State, and especially Tom Allen and Ralph Ortego, for honoring women in their publication, the Women Power 100. It's thrilling to see so many outstanding women, but it's really historic. This year, there's 3 women in the room. There, for the first time in history, a majority of women on the city council, and women taking leadership positions across our city, state, and federal government, first vice president. It's on, and the story is told in City and State. I also want to acknowledge my good friend and colleague, Congresswoman Yvette Clarke, who just spoke up. Women like Yvette and her mother, Dr. Una Clarke, helped pave the way for all of us, and also Suri Kasirer for being such an outstanding example of a woman of great achievement in the private sector. Seeing the women honored by City and State at such a monumental time in our city's history really fills me with great joy. When I started out and when I first got elected, no one in politics really looked very much like me. Usually I was the only woman in the room, and they didn't share the same life experiences as a working mother. And being usually the only woman in the room taught me not only the power, but also the necessity of speaking up and very strongly standing up for what I believe in. It influenced the legislation that I wrote, like the Virginia Act, written after my daughter Virginia, for affordable and available childcare, paid parental leave, work-family balance. These ideas at that time were considered radical. They'd ask me, why are you working on these ideas? They'll never pass. And council leadership refused to take them seriously. The only major bill I passed for women's rights when I was on the council, believe me, I tried, was one creating a commission to study the necessity for the need for childcare and government support for it. That I passed, but they didn't move on any of them. So I can't tell you how excited I am that it is finally being taken seriously by President Biden and the Congress of the United States. Being the only woman also taught me how important it is to stay determined and focused on the task at hand, even in the face of great adversary and adversity. Now the new class of council members who are slated to be sworn in January 2022 will be majority women. It was a long time coming. This is a historic publication that they chronicled this achievement. This makes me optimistic for the future of our city and our recovery, because I know firsthand that when women are at the table, we can accomplish great things like finishing the work that many women started, like myself, on the city council level, passing paid leave for all, the universal child care tax credit, and paid family leave. But we must put into place the policies and provisions that will protect women under the law with women's rights. Usually my entire time, I have been fighting efforts to chip away at women's rights. But currently, with the Texas decision and other cases going to the Supreme Court, they're literally being bulldozed into the ground across our country. It has never been more important to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. I am using my power as chair of the Oversight Committee to produce real results for women. For the first time in 40 years, the ERA got a formal hearing. It only took a woman chair to do that. And when the SBA ruling was decided in Texas, I immediately got to work and organized a hearing in the Oversight Committee to examine this draconian provision. And I am proud to say that last year, my 20-year fight to establish a Women's History Museum on the National Mall was signed into law, because having our history represented and valued is so important. In my fight for women's rights, I finally recognized that it's almost impossible to empower women if you do not even recognize their achievements. And the mall speaks to the values of this country. Half the population will finally be recognized on our national mall. And I'm proud of making that happen. When women are at the table or have a gavel, great things happen. So my goal is that these small steps, or these significant steps towards equality, will produce real change, and having more women at the table will produce real change. Because when women succeed, our nation succeeds. Finally, and very briefly, we just passed a major point. We passed the infrastructure bill. That's step one. Step two will be next week when we go back to Congress. We'll pass the Build Back Better bill that has really so much support for climate change and so many other areas, education, paid family leave, environment, you name it. And I'm leaving on Monday to go back to Congress to sign the bill into law with President Biden and for bill signing. And that's going to be very, very exciting to be there and to be part of it. Part of the bill that passed, the Build Back Better bill, the bill that we're working on and hope to pass next week, the section that my committee wrote electrified the postal fleet of our country and creates the charging stations at the postal office across the country that's necessary for electrification, and moves the government towards electrifying the entire fleet. This will combat climate change. It's important. It will move us off of fossil fuels that are destroying our planet. So there's always a big challenge, and helping us with all our challenges while recognizing the achievements of the leaders of our great city and state is the magazine City and State. Thank you for bringing us the news. Thank you for honoring women. Thank you for being part of the history and chronicling the great advancements that women have made in the edition that you published it. It's a great edition with great women for really the greatest city in the world. Thank you so much. I'm honored to be with you tonight, to be part of it and supporting all the women and all the women that have worked so hard to get us to the point where we are now.
Thank you, Congresswoman, for those words. It's very true. Having women in the room is incredibly important, and sometimes it takes a very long time for even the smallest of victories, for even the smallest of steps forward. And it just, in terms of, women's issues are in fact everyone's issues, and all issues are women's issues. And I think that we'd be remiss to not also acknowledge the monumental achievement that happened this year with the repeal of the walking while trans ban for specifically trans women of color who have been targeted by this outdated law for so many years. So we have some activists on our list as well who fought for that repeal. There's no shortage to the issues that women face, women from all walks of life, that we are finally addressing this year and hopefully in years to come. And leading some of those efforts, of course, is our next speaker, Assembly Member Rodneyse Bichotte Hermelyn, who, as was rightfully pointed out earlier in this session, in this event, is the first woman to lead the Brooklyn Democrats, I believe the largest county organization of Democrats in the country.
Yes.
Well, let's hear from you. We are all looking forward to what you have to say. Take it away.
Good evening. Thank you so much. Before we get started, I wanted to thank City and State and our MC, Rebecca Lewis. I also want to acknowledge our speakers, all strong women leaders, Representatives Yvette Clarke and Carolyn Maloney, Suri Kasirer, President of Kasirer Public Affairs, and Camille Joseph-Goldman, Group Vice President of Government Affairs of Spectrum. Today, we've come together to honor 100 powerful women in the city and state of New York. This is a list unlike any other. For the first time, we have a governor, Kathy Hochul, in the top spot, and an Attorney General, Tish James, being recognized for her work as the state's top legal watchdog. Many of the honorees tonight are members of the new City Council body, where for the first time ever, breaking another set of glass ceilings, we have a female majority, 31 out of 51. It's extraordinary to see so many firsts, but it's even better to know that seeing women in power in leadership roles is going to be the new normal. I'm Assemblymember Rodneyse Bichotte Hermelyn. I have the distinct privilege of being the first woman to serve as the Brooklyn Democratic Party chair, and it is the largest Democrat county in the United States. I am the first Black woman to serve as the chair of any political party in New York City. I'm also the first Haitian American woman to serve in the Assembly from New York City. In Albany, I also serve as the chair of the Task Force on Women's Issues and chair of the Subcommittee of the Minority and Women Business Enterprise. My story is not a straight line. It comes with ups and downs, from being turned away from a hospital when I was in premature labor with my son, Jonah Bishop Cohen, to passing laws that see to it that other women, and Black women especially, are not turned away in their most vulnerable moments. Before running for office, I served in a male-dominated industries. I worked as a math teacher, I worked as an electrical engineer, and as an investment banker. During times, there were hardly any women in these professions. In Albany, we gradually are seeing more. But the truth is, women still only make up a third of the state legislature, even though we make up more than 50% of the state population. That's one reason why it's important to honor and celebrate women's accomplishments. Almost all women have bumped up against the glass ceiling at some point in their careers. So let's share the lessons we've heard tonight of those who broke right through it and how they did it. Many of tonight's honorees are pioneers in their own rights from all different industries. We talked about the 31 women in the city council, we in the state assembly, state senate, and in the federal, we have Senator Majority Leader Andrew Stewart Cousins and Representative Grace Meng. We have Assembly Member Majority Leader Crystal Peoples-Stokes. These are people I've worked with. And my neighbor, Assembly Member Helene Weinstein, who's the first woman in Ways and Means. We have Assembly Member Latoya Joyner and Karina Rodneyse, and Senator Biaggi and Ramos and Assembly Member New. We have the first woman in the Bronx for Borough President, Vanessa Gibson. Now we have a number of city council women seeking leadership in the city council: Adrienne Adams, Diana Ayala, Gail Brewer, Farrah Lewis, and Carolina Rivera. And how about the women who's about to lead New York City in many ways? Ingrid Lewis-Martin, my dear sister. And as you hear, just announced today, Sheena Wright, heading the transition committee. We have so many people who will be taking part of moving and transitioning our whole city and state. And I'm just really excited. And let's not forget about labor. Right now, our honorees tonight, but the most important issues are for women because they've experienced some of these challenges themselves. Maternal health care is a critical condition in this country where the rates of infant mortality are shocking for a civilized nation. Child care too is more affordable in many other countries where it's considered a human right. And as we all know, this invariably affects more mothers than fathers. That is why I chair the task force on women's issue. I'm fighting for all these things in Albany. I'm fighting for fair pay by expanding mentorship and networking opportunities and increasing the availability of capital to women-owned businesses. And as the chair of the subcommittee on minority and women-owned businesses, I am fighting for the small business owners that want just a piece of the pie. Seeing all the strong women that join us tonight has inspired my confidence in what we've achieved this year and what we can achieve this decade for New York. By working on these issues together, we can achieve a more equitable world for everyone. Let's go, women. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Assembly Member, for your words. And certainly I know I have done some reporting at the New York City level in terms of there are some incoming council members who have experienced complications in pregnancies and doctors who wouldn't take them seriously. And we're fortunate enough to have support there to make sure that they got through alive, which is not always the case. And having experiences like that in elected office, people with experiences like that in elected office is so important, because otherwise those issues may never get addressed because people don't realize how big they are. So, you know, people who have experiences like yours, people who have experiences like some of our incoming council members are so crucial to seeing the change that we want to see in government. But without further ado, that concludes the speaking portion, the remarks from our wonderful guests who have joined us and shared their thoughts about this momentous time for women in New York State and New York City. We are going to move on now to honoring all 100, although I believe it's technically a little bit more than 100, since some of the entries have a couple names to them. So We are now going to honor all of the people who are on our list this evening. So we're gonna, I guess, get started on the slideshow, and I'm going to apologize beforehand for any name mispronunciations. Please, I apologize beforehand if I mispronounce any of your names. Feel free to call me out by email or text or in the chat. But just know that it is unintentional, and I deeply apologize if I accidentally mess up anyone's names. So let's get into it. Oh, am I wrong? Is there no slideshow? I was just informed there is no slideshow. I apologize for that as well. So I will just be naming everyone out. Starting first and foremost with our first female governor, Governor Kathy Hochul. Our first female Attorney General, State Attorney General Letitia James. Our first female Majority Leader of the State Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins. Lots of firsts, as we said. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, Representative Nydia Velasquez, Representative Grace Meng, Assembly Majority Leader Crystal Peoples-Stokes, Secretary to the Governor Karen Persicilli-Keough, Director of State Operations Catherine Garcia, who very nearly became the first female mayor of New York City, but Eric Adams pulled out the win in that primary. Commissioner of the State Education Department, Betty Rosa. Incoming Commissioner for the State Department of Health, Mary T. Bassett. Chief Judge at the State Court of Appeals, Janet DeFiore. Brooklyn Democratic Chair and Assembly Member Rodneyse Bichotte Hermelyn, who we just heard from. The Bronx District Attorney Darcel Clarke and Queens District Attorney Melinda Katz. President and CEO of the Partnership for New York City, Catherine Wild. Chair of the State Senate Finance Committee, Liz Krueger, and Assembly Ways and Means Committee Chair, Helene Weinstein. Counsel to the Governor, Elizabeth Fine. Assembly members Latoya Joyner, Carinas Reyes, and Carmen de la Rosa. State Senators Alessandra Biaggi, Jessica Ramos, and Assembly Member Yuli New. Representative Carolyn Maloney, who we also just heard from. Thank you for joining us, Congressmember. Representative Yvette Clarke, thank you as well. We just heard from you. Thank you for joining us. Nassau County Executive Laura Curran. Speaker candidates Adrian Adams, Diana Ayala, Gail Brewer, Farah Lewis, and Carlina Rivera. Founder and President of Kasirer, Suri Kasirer, who we also heard from. Thank you again. Partners at Bolton St. John, Emily Giske and Juanita Scarlett. Deputy Mayor for Health and Human Services, Melanie Hartzog. New York City Schools Chancellor, Misha Porter. Chief of Staff to New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio, Emma Wolf. Deputy Brooklyn Borough President, Ingrid Lewis-Martin. President and CEO of United Way of New York City, Sheena Wright. Campaign Manager for Eric Adams for Mayor, Katie Moore. Co-founder and CEO of Nicholas and Lentz Communications, Christine Nicholas. President and CEO of the Business Council of New York State, Heather Brissetti. Representative Kathleen Rice. Representatives Elise Stefanik, Nicole Maliotakis, and Claudia Tenney. President and CEO, co-chair and chair of the Higher Heights for America PAC, Glinda Carr, Kimberly Peeler Allen, and L. Joy Williams. Bronx Borough President-elect Vanessa Gibson, New York City First Lady Shirlane McCray, State Director of the Working Families Party, Sochi Naimeka, Principal and co-founder of Berlin Rosen, Valerie Berlin, President of Adams Advisors LLC, Amelia Adams, Group Vice President for Government Affairs at Charter Communications, Camille Joseph-Goldman, who I think that's the last of our speakers. So also, thank you again, all of our speakers. Chief of Staff and Counsel to the State Senate Majority Conference, Chantel Smith. Buffalo Democratic mayoral nominee, India Walton. President of Connective Strategies, Taquana Henderson Rivers. President of Effective Media Strategies, Lupe Todd Medina. Transgender activists, T.S. Candy, Cecilia Gentili, and Kiara St. James. President of the American Federation of Teachers, Randy Weingarten. Mara Gay, member of the New York Times editorial board. Rachel Nordlinger, partner at Mercury. The co-founders of the Sexual Harassment Working Group, Elizabeth Crothers, Leah Herbert, Rita Paracel, and Erica Vladimir. Vice President of Public Policy at Verizon, Alicia Eve. President and CEO of Emblem Health, Karen Ignagni. President and CEO of WIN, Christine Quinn. Host of Capital Tonight, Susan Arbetter. CEO of One Brooklyn Health, Lorraine Brown. Board members for Rank the Vote NYC, Susan Lerner, Betsy Gottbaum, and Rose Pierre Lewis. President of the New York League of Conservation Voters, Julie Teague. CEO of the Association for a Better New York, Melva Miller. New York City's Senior Advisor for Recovery, Lorraine Grillo. Nominee for Regional Administrator of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, Alika Amphrey Samuel, an outgoing council member. Managing Partner Kivit, Managing Partner at Kivit, Maggie Moran, although I believe she may have just announced her exit from that role. President of Hunter College, Jennifer Robb. President and CEO of Pegula Sports and Entertainment, Kim Pegula. CEO of the New York Tri-State Region CBRE, Mary Ann Teague. Founder and Executive Director, New York Taxi Workers Alliance, Ravi Desai. President of Cooper Hill, Rezi Cooper. President of the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership, Regina Meyer. State Director of AARP New York, Beth Finkel. President and CEO of Buffalo Niagara Partnership, Dottie Gallagher. Chair of the Cannabis Control Board, Tremaine Wright. New York City Council member-elect, Tiffany Caban. Founder and CEO of Success Academy Charter Schools, Eva Moskowitz. President and CEO of New York Public Radio, Goli Shikalaslami. I apologize, I was not prepared for that name, but she's doing great work at New York Public Radio. Founder and CEO at YNY, Joni Yaswin. President of the National Organization for Women of New York, Sonia Osario. President of the Alliance for Downtown New York, Jessica Lappin. President and CEO of Children's Aid, Phoebe Boyer. Founder and Executive Director of Tech NYC, Julie Samuels. Executive Director and President, two separate, Executive Director and the President of New York State Nurses Association, Pat Kane and Nancy Higgins. Executive Director and the Board Chair of Eleanor's Legacy, Sophie Neer and Donna Zaccaro. Presiding Partner at Kravith, Swain and Moore LLP, Faiza Saeed. Interim CEO of Planned Parenthood of Greater New York, Joy Calloway. Media strategist at the LAKPR Group, Lisa Linden. Chair of the New York Gaming Association, Taryn Duffy. President and CEO of the New York City School Construction Authority, Nina Kabuta. Founder and Principal Officer at Bedouin and Company, Heather Bedouin. President of the New York Community Trust, Lori Slutsky. Partner at Gibson Dunn, Mylan Dennerstein. Managing Director at Ostroff Associates, Diana Ostroff. Shareholder at Greenberg Traurig, Tricia Asaro. Vice President at the Parkside Group, Saima Anjam. Executive Directors of the 1199 SEIU Funds, Donna Ray, Sandy Vito, and Vivian Fox. Provost of Berkeley College, Marcia Pollard. Chief Diversity Officer at National Grid, Natalie Edwards. Interim Vice Chancellor for University and Advancement at CUNY, Andrea Shapiro Davis. Executive Director of Global Kids, Dominique Jones. New York State Political Director for the North Atlantic States Regional Council of Carpenters, Tricia Brown. And finally, Public Policy Manager at Airbnb, Kelly Fay. Congratulations once again to all of our honorees, and thank you everyone who joined us this evening and all of our speakers as well. I hope that you had as much enjoyment listening to them as I did. Before we wrap up, I just would like to thank our great sponsors. Once again, Airbnb, Berkeley College, Spectrum, Kasirer, and the League of Voluntary Hospitals and Homes of New York. Thank you. You make events like these possible. So thank you for your support. And before we go, just want to shout out a couple of our upcoming events that we hope to see you all at in the coming weeks, including our Staten Island Power 100 celebration on November 17th at 5 p.m. On Thursday, the 18th at 1 p.m., we are holding our annual virtual government procurement conference, which is always a good time. And on Tuesday, December 7th at 1 p.m., we are hosting our annual virtual transportation summit. Registration for all of these are free and can be found on our website and in the chat. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us. Thank you to all of our speakers this evening, and congratulations to all of the amazing women who are being honored this evening. Have a good night, everyone.